episode of the Coaching Cast podcast is brought to you in partnership with the brilliant Soulfully Single, founded by Julie Wild. Soulfully Single is the supportive, fun and empowering community for sociable singles who want to grow in confidence, reconnect with themselves and others, and use their single time to be the next best version of themselves. Soulfully Single aims to ease loneliness through community, connection and personal growth. So if you find yourself recently single or know someone who is, head over to www.soulfullysingle.co.uk to download a free workbook to help you heal and move on after the end of a relationship, or join one of the feel-good monthly coffee meetups. Hi, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Suzy, and this is the Coaching Cast. We are the no-nonsense podcast chatting about the things impacting you at work right now, helping you to survive and thrive in today's workplace.
We discuss different topics each episode, sharing our ideas, hints and top tips from our experiences of working in the corporate world, running our own businesses and also being qualified coaches. We also try to have a few laughs along the way too, because taking yourself too seriously is just boring. We hope you enjoy listening. In today's episode, we're talking about that tricky situation of when you have to let someone go from their employment. We discuss and share our own experiences, plus offer our top tips for managing this often complex situation. So stay with us and enjoy. We just wanted to acknowledge that since we last recorded an episode of the Coaching Cast, a horrendous conflict has unfolded in the Middle East. We're sending our thoughts and love to all of those who are directly affected by the situation, both in the Middle East and globally. Visualise the scene. You're watching the BBC's The Apprentice. It's the boardroom. And Sir Alan Sugar has just said those famous words to a candidate. You're fired. Cue a gracious thanks, possibly a little bit of embarrassment, and a swift exit into the black cab sitting outside. If only it were that simple outside of reality TV. So this got us thinking here at the Coaching Cast about this often emotionally charged and challenging situation. Telling someone their services are no longer required in the workplace. How do you know when it's time to let someone go? Is there a way of approaching this with compassion? How should you approach it for the best of everyone involved? We explore and discuss this topic. So, Suze, what is your experience of firing somebody? Have you ever been let go yourself from employment, a workplace?
Oh, there's so much to pick there to start us up on this episode. So yes, I have been let go from employment. I can see Lisa's face like looking at me on the screen like, what? You're such a goody two shoes. What do you mean you've been let go? Yes, I was let go from a seasonal job when I was at university. So
I did not know this. I was about to say, what? You've never been fired? Okay,
yeah, I have.
Brilliant. Okay, brilliant. Susie's been fired. I'm enjoying this already. Carry
on. So yes, I was fired from the well-known bath bomb chain that's often on the high street where there are shops. You smell them before you see them. I think we know what we're talking.
Yes, we know what you're talking about
here. So I worked in their shop in Sheffield city centre when I was at university. And I don't know, I honestly, to this day, right, don't actually know why I was fired, honestly, truthfully, which kind of leads probably into some things we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a seasonal job. So I had a Christmas job there. I turned up for my shifts, like I was always there. I even remember, so I was thinking about this randomly the other day. I even sold one of their massive mega gift boxes. So like, you know, they have those like pre-packaged like gift boxes with like various bath bombs and like bits and bobs in, and they're really pretty, like wrapped up, and they look gorgeous. Well, they had this massive mega one. It was like probably over 100 quid. It was really expensive back in the day. And I even sold one of them, which was like the absolute ideal thing you should be selling. And I still got fired. So she just kind of said to me, the manager at the time, that my services was just no longer required. And it was like on the lead up to Christmas. So it was kind of like on the big thing. And yeah, she just kind of like fired me. And she fired me in the staff room as well. So there was loads of people there. I remember that as
Oh
well.
God.
And I just kind of left and that was it. So in answer to your question, yes, I have been let go from a job, and there was no kind of lead up to it. And I still don't really know why I was fired. Like, I can't answer that right now. I have no idea. And I think because I was quite taken back in the moment and at the time, I didn't see it coming. And I think that's the piece that is quite important in this situation, because look, whether you are the person that's firing someone or having that conversation, or the person experiencing it, it sucks. It does suck, no matter like who you are, what your involvement is in this situation. Admittedly, the person who's losing their job, you know, it sucks a bit more, like 100%. Like, we're not kind of downplaying that. But yeah, my experience on this topic is, I think that through my personal experience, you need to just kind of be really compassionate and really, it's hard, it's tricky. You've got to come at it with a bit of empathy and think about, if I was in this position, how would I want to be treated? But equally, I would say you've got to manage it in a way that you kind of, before you get to this point, there's been a fair and transparent process before you get to that final conversation, that final point where you let somebody go.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's the right thing to do. That's what we have to be doing, also legally, you know. And it's really important that, going back to my days when I was in that staff room in Sheffield, I didn't see it coming. And so the impact on me, I probably still like is within me right now. Like, I probably have taken that through into my future career. And that's not what we want. Like, we want people to be able to kind of seen the train before it's come to the station, if you get my point.
Yeah, I love that. So that was your experience of yourself being fired.
Yeah.
What about your experience of firing others?
Yes, I have done it. I've done it a few times. It's not nice. I'll be honest. I found it challenging because I'm quite an empathetic person. And the circumstances that led to that situation were not the usual circumstances. I'd say they were quite different to what you would normally kind of expect. So things happened quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it was a bit surprising. And it then led to kind of that decision. Yeah, I didn't enjoy it at all. I don't think anybody would. I have to say, I came out of those conversations, and now I reflect, I think I was very transparent, very clear, very professional, very concise, very factual. I wasn't emotive, but I was emotive maybe in a way, though, actually, now I'm just reflecting in the moment, emotive in the sense of that I tried to do it with compassion, with an element of empathy, whilst understanding that for this person, they're hearing news which is absolutely going to change their life. That's their livelihood at stake. So they're going to probably not particularly want a hug from me as I'm the person delivering that news. I've got to be respectful of that and mindful of that. But I also want to treat them and treat the situation in a way where kind of empathy and compassion is at the center of that. And I always went into it thinking, if this was me, again, going back to my situation in that staff room in Sheffield, if this was me, how would I want to be treated? And I always tried, and I think I got it right to that extent. But I always try to have that at the front of the way I approached, especially that final conversation where you conclude that employment, because emotions are high. And I think I've also had it where maybe I've coached or talked about this situation with people and they've not really thought about it. And it's not until I've kind of held the mirror up and said, well, how would you think in this, how would you be or feel in this situation, that they've then suddenly reflected around their own like prep for those conversations, perhaps where they're holding it. You know, like one of the worst things I think you can do is do it in one of those flipping fishbowl glass meeting rooms.
Yeah, the worst.
You know, you've got to have an element of prep around this as well, like to make sure it's respectful. It takes into account the other person. You know, you don't want to be having this conversation in an open goldfish bowl. You know, is there a room that's you can book which is slightly aside, that's a bit more private, you know? And also the logistics, the practical measure things. So when people are hearing this news for the first time, in my experience, not for everyone, but in my experience, they start asking quite quickly a lot of practical questions, like, well, what about my car? What about if there's a bonus? What about my bonus?
Yeah.
What about my laptop? Like, because that's all the things they can control, like, because they want the answers to that, and that gives them a feeling of control. Because especially if this news is new news, it hopefully isn't, and it shouldn't be surprising, but thinking about me in that staff room in Sheffield, it was new news. A lot of those kind of practical things then come into play. So you've got to be prepped as well, in my experience, to be able to give those answers really, really quickly and clearly, so that you're not then being like, oh, I just need to go and find that out, or I just need to, I don't know, actually, I've not thought about that. As much as you can, you've prepared for some of those questions. Because also that helps the professionalism of it, that helps that kind of ending, I suppose, in a really fair, professional, adult to adult manner. And I think that's what I've always tried to do, is have these conversations as an adult to adult, not an adult child. This isn't about power at this point. And that's only been my experiences. I know maybe CBeebies listening to this thinking, well, that's definitely not the experiences I've had or the approach I've taken if I've had to be in that situation. I could only talk about my own experiences, but I think they haven't, that approach hasn't kind of gone far wrong, I think, for me, by handling it in that manner. What about you? What's been some of your experiences on this topic?
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't been fired, so it's never been an experience I've received. I've been told my probation period's been extended, which, to be quite honest, felt like I'd been fired at the time. But that's also because as an individual, I wouldn't say I've ever failed at anything. And so there is, you know, not in the real extreme sense of the word, like I've got things wrong. I've made mistakes, but I wouldn't ever describe any of that as failure. It's just life and learning. But I wouldn't say I've ever, I wouldn't say I've ever had anything that final happen to me in that regard. Like when I've changed jobs, I've moved. And you know, I feel actually very grateful and privileged that I've been in that position. But I have to admit, during my corporate years, it actually got to the point where I felt it probably could be good for me to be let go. I don't know why. It sounds weird, doesn't it? But there was an element of thinking, actually, that could be a good experience to learn from and to see how I survive. Because I think, especially when I've been in some organizations for a very long time, and had managed to avoid being made redundant as well. And I always thought, oh, that possibly could be a good experience to know what that feels like to go through that process, to see how I would react, how I would survive it, how I could manage it. But also as well from that perspective of then knowing what that's like if I ever had to deliver that to somebody else. Because I think, you know, you do gain so much from experiences and you learn so much from them, and it actually enables you to be much more compassionate and well-rounded than if you ever have to deliver it yourself. I've had to deliver redundancy rounds to other people. I think they're some of the most challenging because you are letting people go en masse. So you're dealing with many different individuals and their emotions and their circumstances. And there's a whole myriad that people are going through in that. Some people are related. They're seeing it as an opportunity. Some people are terrified and think it's the end of everything. You know, it's such a roller coaster ride with redundancies. And there is so much to navigate. both in terms of individuals and what they're going through at a singular level, but then also at a overall business level and the legalities, making sure you're doing everything right. And I know when I had to make an announcement of redundancy to a department, and I think it was multiple departments at once, and I was asked to take the lead on it. And actually, it was a delegation from one of my senior managers. Thank you very much for that. I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe in the redundancy round. I didn't believe why we were doing it.
It's the hardest. I've done that before as well. And that is hard.
When you don't buy into it and you have to, that is a real challenge. And I wanted to own everything I was saying and for it to have an element of humanness and me in it. That was really important to me during those messaging, because I didn't want to just be the robot delivering the corporate line, because I didn't believe in it. But also I knew that in my head, that wouldn't land. So I worked really hard during that announcement to own every word and to enable it to be human and to sound like me and not to sound like our corporate communications team or HR for that matter. So I didn't want it to come across like policy either. And I do know that when I delivered it, people did approach me afterwards and thank me for it. I remember that, because I remember people saying we really appreciated you taking us through it and helping us to understand it and acknowledging how we might be feeling. And that really meant a lot to me at the time, because I felt, do you know what? I don't agree with this, but I'm not pretending in any way. I'm being honest. I'm being transparent. So to your point, I think that's so key. But also trying to, just find some identity in it. I think that's always meant a lot to me in corporate comms anyway. I just never wanted to sound like I was delivering a party line. I never wanted it to come across like that. So actually, even when I didn't agree with decisions being made, and it's not just with redundancy, with anything, I'd always try to find something in the decision that I could engage with and make sense of and interpret it for myself and then deliver that. That was always something that was really important to me. It still is about most things. But I have had to fire someone, and that had been a decision that I made about that individual, and I was in control of the whole decision. So that was to do with an individual that wasn't performing in my team. And it was difficult to do because, as you've already covered, you are changing someone's life at that time. You are affecting their livelihood. You are, if you know that member of your team, if you've chosen to get to know them, and I'd like to think everyone listening has with their team, you do know about them. You know that what's going on in their lives. You know that they may have a mortgage or be trying to get one, or you know that they may be getting married even, or got kids. You know so much about them. So you do understand the correlation between the job and that life that they're building. So when you make the decision to let them go and to change that and to sever it, you do carry that with you.
You do.
And I think if you're a human being with any kind of feeling, you feel it. But I think what you've always got to be so careful of is that you truly understand the decision you're making and you feel confident that you're making the right one. And I would argue for the benefit of everybody, because I do genuinely believe that you as a leader and a manager should be supporting everyone to be doing a good job. And you should therefore also recognize when that person, even without the intention of doing a bad job, aren't doing very well, and how that's not good for them either. Because I know in my experience, I'd worked really hard with that individual to support them to do a good job. And I know that they had tried, but it just was not the right job for them. And that's all it was. It just was that the job was not the right fit, that it didn't complement their skills, that they weren't able to be their best. And it was draining them as well. I knew that they were under a lot of pressure and anxiety because of it. So actually, if we had tried everything we could, both of us, and that it had been fair in the process to give them the time and the support and the direction to have the opportunity to be better, and it still had not worked, then actually the only option for all of us was to change it and to do something more drastic. and that was letting them go. And I think, you know, it was not a surprise to them because we'd had open dialogue up to that point. I had been managing their expectations. You know, I'd made that clear throughout. So, you know, by the time I then delivered that decision, they knew. They knew what that meeting was about. I mean, I didn't have to say it. They knew it. And it was over very quickly. Very quickly.
That's the thing. Like I think my experiences are a bit different to yours actually, because the 3 situations I've had where I've had to let someone go is because there's been an element of I suppose deceit.
Yeah.
So some things have been found, and that's been the conclusion. So those people,
so what, like an element of misconduct, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
rather than underperformance, it's a bit deeper and more complicated than that.
And so like emotions are even higher. It's been forced upon them a little bit more, and there's a bit of justification that goes on because people are fighting for for their livelihoods,
and fighting for their position in it, in terms of stating their reasoning. But
absolutely,
I still think there's choice there, though. I still think there's a choice. You can choose to you have every element of control around how you choose to behave, and I think misconduct is a really interesting one, and one that I do think organizations and individuals find really difficult to deal with because there's so much subjectiveness in it. But at the end of the day, if you have a policy that's quite clear and a person's misbehaving, and misconduct, I do think is quite, I don't think it's that easy to behave in a way that's classified as misconduct often, anyway, not for me. I do think you can still hold people account to the decisions they made in that moment that led to it.
And also, like in that situation, there was me and also kind of another manager, and the emotions were kind of heightened for the individual, but also for like the leader at the time, and all of that. And it was all kind of intermixed. And actually my role very much before I went into that conversation and what we'd prepped and planned for was that actually, you know, I'm going to be real. You can't probably come at this objectively because you've got some emotion with this. Like you need to be in this situation involved, but I will lead it because I think that's the right thing to do. And so because I was kind of a little bit more removed, I was able to approach it with some calm. I think I'm quite a calm person anyway, but I upped that even more. Like, and I was really kind of like centered and calm. And again, I was really like, I want this person, this is shit. Like, this is shit. Like, I can't say it's not. Like, this is awful. But I want to be able to approach this conversation with this person with just as much compassion and in a graceful manner as much as I possibly can. That this person is going to take so much learning from this experience, I would imagine. I'd hope that they don't need me to tell them X, Y, and Z, or that they don't need my opinion or my judgment, and that's not appropriate. And that's not right. Because they will do that for themselves. You would like to hope.
But I think that's a really important point. You take opinion, you take judgment out of all of it in this whole process. It has to be factual. It has to be objective.
100%.
And you keep it in that space. And you can still be compassionate in that element. You can still be compassionate, but that doesn't mean you have to show. You don't have to cross that boundary, particularly because I do think in a process, I think that's what you have to recognize as well. And often with this is it is a process. So keep within the boundaries of the process for both of your sake, because that's what keeps it clear. And we talked about this before, when for me, this is a bit similar to feedback. It's that process of, in a similar way, of having a really clear, direct, honest, objective conversation. That's what this is. So the clearer you are, the kinder you're being. It comes back to that famous Brené Brown quote that I'm obsessed with. But being clear is being kind in this type of scenario more than ever.
For sure. And I think if you think you're listening to this now and you think, well, like, how can you be compassionate in the moment? Because if you need to be factual and you need to be professional and concise. Well, for example, the things I did was that, I made sure they had a drink of water in front of them before before we had that conversation. We sat down, we were all at the same height.
Yes.
We were we weren't kind of opposite each other, you know, like that apprentice setup you talked about at the start. You know, there wasn't a big table separating us. You know, it was a bit more kind of close knit than that. And actually I would pause, because that's a lot for somebody to digest in those situations. I would pause and be like, do you need a second? Do you need a moment? I appreciate this is a lot for you to kind of digest.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would go at there, I would alter the pace, you know, and I would in the moment be like, just take a second. It's okay. You know, it's fine. There's no massive rush to this. Or equally, if I could see somebody was getting agitated, I would be like, you know, stand up for a second. Why don't you just pop to the loo, come back, you know, let's take a break. You know, and that's what we mean here. Like, well, I certainly mean in terms of showing a bit of that kind of thought, that compassion, that empathy around how I would want to be treated. And it's about doing that to the very last moment. And that's how I did it. And I have to say, I think that worked. And every occasion I did that, it definitely worked. Don't get me wrong, it felt awful for everybody involved, especially for the person that was being let go, 100%. And emotions are high, you know, it is. And I think that's where you support each other. You know, you need to do this with a witness, these conversations, whether that's HR or somebody else. I've done it with both HR and with a colleague. And, you know, that's where you go into it having to be prepared. You know, what role is everyone going to play? You know, who's going to lead it? Who's going to have the paperwork, or who's going to know about the logistics and have those questions. And you open the space up as well for the person to ask questions, because they will have a lot, and expect that they will have a lot, you know, and create that time. I appreciate not everybody goes about it in that manner and with that respect and in that way, especially when, you know, it's a situation where there's been misconduct as well. But I think, in my experience, having been let go in that shop in Sheffield and not knowing why I was let go, and just kind of, oh, right, okay, that's that then, and having to kind of process and unpick that for myself, versus also being on the other side of things. The one thing that does stand out for me through all of that is, just being adult to adult, and just treating it with respect that you would hope everybody would come at it with. So they're my experiences and some of my kind of considerations.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to take away. I think the thing I would add, and you'd already said it to begin with, is that ensuring that the space is private and away from others, that there's no audience.
Oh, honestly, the amount of times I have, probably more often than I would have liked, had to have conversations around, where are we actually doing this? And they'd be like, well, in this room. And I'm like, that's in the middle of the office where people can see. Like, we've got to think about this intentionally. Let's not just go into the next available meeting room and have this comment. Like, you know, you've got to really think about that. And it's a really valid point, for sure.
Yeah, it's like you said, though, I love the fact you use the word respect. You can do these things respectfully. That's exactly right. At the end of the day, this person is still a human being, and for whatever reason, whatever's gone on, that at the end of the day is still true. And if you want to help manage the emotions in the room, you've got to consider all of it, and avoid anything that's going to unnecessarily heighten emotions. Or, you know, you want to support that person to be in control of themselves, because they are not in control of what's happening to them. So I think anything you can do to then nurture their response is only going to be the right thing. I mean, you can't control it completely, because they're going to react however they choose to, but you don't want to be the trigger beyond what is already going to be triggering. So you control everything else and keep it as calm and sedate and as simple as you possibly can, so that, as I said, the only trigger is what you're delivering, and that is going to go either way, and that you can't do anything about, because the fact is that if that's the truth, that's the decision, and that's what's needed to be done, that's what you do. So, and I think, like, keeping it factual is keeping it fair, because this is where, when we're talking about being compassionate, we're not saying you be ruinously empathetic. you call a spade a
No.
spade. Like if this person is made a mistake, if they have if what they've done is classified as misconduct, or if it's underperformance, that's what you say, because that is the truth. That's the facts that you present to them. You don't sugarcoat it, because you need to be clear. Like we said, being clear is being kind, and it needs to be delivered where there is no doubt. Like the decision is the decision. And as soon as you start deviating away from that, you'll confuse the message and you'll leave room for misinterpretation.
Exactly.
Confusion. It is just what it is. But yeah, you can be compassionate without being and exactly, I think you've nailed it in the way you've described it. I think that's
Have you
exactly
watched
true.
Succession?
I haven't, but my friends are obsessed with it and tell me I need to watch it.
So CBBS, if anyone's watched Succession, there's a lot of firings in Succession.
Good examples or bad examples, Suzy?
Probably more of the opposite examples of what we're talking about here. And there's a scene in particular where Jerry, who's the lawyer, gets fired, and it's in a really public setting. I think they're on a boat, unless I'm confusing scenes, which I possibly could be. Or maybe they're not actually on a boat.
This isn't Below Deck that you're talking about now, is it?
Oh no, they all just merge into one though, don't they? For me, I think.
Your favourite.
But anyway, there's a lot of firing scenes in Succession, and I think if you're a visual person, a bit like I am, and you want to bring this to life for yourself and another level, it's the opposite of what goes on in Succession. It's what we're talking about here.
Brilliant. So, top tips then for if for this type of situation, if there are CBBs who are listening who are in this position where they know they have to fire somebody, or they think it's going in that direction, or maybe they've done it recently and found it really difficult, what are your top tips for how to do this as best as you can?
Yeah.
Because that's how I would describe this. I wouldn't say this is about aiming to be really successful at firing people and be really great at it. I don't think that's something any of us would really like to focus on. But like, how can you do this as best as you can?
Yeah. So first off, I'd say let's just bring through the main things we've talked about there. So I think actually prep is quite important. That's
I wouldn't say quite. I'd say it is the most important thing is your prep.
Yeah.
Prep is everything.
The practical stuff matters.
Yes.
So I think ahead, think about that. Think about the route, the location or the room or whatever. What's going to happen to the laptop, the card, the credit card, if they've got a company credit card, the bonus, the card, whatever, work through that, because that will be what somebody will want to know.
Yeah. Also
prep around, you will do this with somebody else. There may be two other people, there may be one other person. What's your each of your roles, who's going to lead it. Just, it's a bit like, in some sense, how you would approach a negotiation. Like, you've got to plan it and think about how you would approach it and the role that everyone's going to play. So prep is critical, is my first top tip.
Yeah.
Second is, if this was you, how would you want to be treated?
Yeah.
And then follow that. And I think if you do that, you can't hopefully go far wrong unless you've got some, bizarre kind of way in which you would like to be treated in this situation. But I think, follow your kind of gut on this and think about, if that was you, how would you want to be treated?
Yeah.
And then my final top tip is be clear, be concise, and be human.
Yeah. Cool. Love it. Brilliant. Thank you. Well, we will be sharing these top tips towards the end of the show. So stay tuned and we will give those to you.
It's now time for Bullshit Bingo, the feature where we call out phrases which get commonly used in the workplace, which, quite frankly, make us cringe. Our Bullshit Bingo for today's episode came from one of you, our CBBs, who got in contact on LinkedIn. And it is, are we ready? Drum roll, please. We need to bottom this out. Now, I saw this in my messages and I was like, oh, we've had this. I'm pretty sure
I know. I don't think we have.
Because I was like, this is a classic. Like I say, it's all like we need to bottom this out. Like 100%, I say this quite frequently. I went into the bullshit bingo tracker that we have, and it wasn't on there. And I was like, we've not had it, so it's in. Anyway, we've had it now. It's in, but
we need to bottom this out.
We need to bottom this out for sure. For sure, this is one I've used frequently.
I think it's a good one. Is this what we think is a bullshit bingo? It's not bullshit though, is it? We need to bottom this out. Isn't it just a phrase?
It's a bit bullshitty as a phrase though, isn't it? I think it is.
Oh, it's so part of the repertoire.
It's
difficult, isn't it? I quite like this one. We need to bottom it out. I'm sure I must have said it loads of times. To be honest, that these days when the bullshit bingos come out, I have an absolute mind blank. I don't know whether I say these things or not anymore, or maybe I say all of them all of the time, and they're just so entrenched in my language that I've lost my awareness of them. I'm not sure. But I mean, God, loads of us must use this. We need to bottom this out.
100%. I think it's funny as well, because when we talk to people, like either Lisa and I or individually, this has certainly happened to me, and they listen to the podcast and then they use a bullshit bingo in the conversation with Lisa and myself or individually, and then they check themselves in the moment. They're like, oh, I've just used a bullshit bingo. And then we do the same sometimes when we're talking to each other. If we say something like, I just need to get my ducks in a row, like, oh, I just used a bullshit bingo there.
Or what did you say in the early part of this conversation? You just used an absolutely brilliant one. Although whether it's bullshit, it's not. It's just used the metaphor, but it was so good.
Oh, you want to see the train thing?
Yeah, get the train into the station or whatever you said.
You want to see the train before it arrives in the station.
That's it. That's what you said. Which was brilliant, actually. But I would say I suppose it is a bullshit bingo. It is brilliant. Yeah, you want to see that train before it arrives in the station.
Exactly. Well, on this episode, you've got 2 bullshit bingos. So we've bumped up the content there.
Yeah, we have. That's a brilliant one. So CBBS, what bullshit bingo would you like included in a future episode? I can't even say the bloody phrase now. What bullshit bingo would you like to see included in a future episode? Oh God. Drop us a DM on Instagram. Where you can find us. That's at the Coaching Cast, and you can also contact Suzy and I via LinkedIn through our individual profiles. We'll put those in the show notes so you can find us. But yeah, just make sure that when you hear these brilliant bullshit phrases that you share them with us so that we can share them aloud here on the Coaching Cast to make us all cringe enjoyment with those. We're coming to the end of today's episode, where we've been discussing that very tricky situation of letting someone go from their employment. Our top tips and recommendations from today's episode are: number 1, it's all in the prep. So really take the time to prepare the facts around the situation, the message that you're going to deliver, the location. So really consider the environment that you're creating. So like we talked about, ensure that the environment and the location is not increasing the trigger in the emotion. So really take a lot of time to consider that, and really consider some of the more logistical, practical questions that maybe are. So Suzy was talking about, whether it's about equipment or whether it's about the actual date of the conclusion of the employment. Just ensure that you've got all your ducks in a row, to add a bullshit bingo into that. Number 2, really think about, if this were you, how would you want to be treated? Think about that and think, how can I apply my answers to that question to the approach that I'm going to take? And the third top tip, is be clear, be concise, and remember to be human, and acknowledge that that person you're speaking to is a human being too. We've got some self-coaching questions to support. So these questions are, if you are in this situation right now and you are needing to let somebody go. So ask yourself the questions: what has led to this situation? So really help to gain your clarity and get your facts. Number 2, how can I be both clear and kind? Number 3, how can I support the individual in the moment to achieve the outcome that's required? Now, if this is a situation you've recently gone through and it's now in the past, then ask yourself this reflective question. What can I learn from this situation? So really use that question to help identify learnings for yourself and identify things that you could do differently and possibly better for next time. Don't worry if you can't remember these, so both the top tips and the self-coaching questions. These will be on our Instagram page at the Coaching Cast over the course of the next few weeks. So do go and connect with us there so that you don't miss anything. Also, if you enjoyed this particular episode, check out our episode on growing talent, which is episode 5 in season 2. That just may give you some different perspective around performance management and developing people. So you can find that episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. Now, talking about episodes, we will have another new one for you coming up in early December, and it's going to be our Christmas party. CBBs, we know you're really busy, but it would mean the world to us if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the Coaching Cast wherever you listen. It really, really does help the podcast more than you could possibly know. So it means that other people find us more easily so we can grow. And also, if you subscribe, it reminds you when we have a new episode so you don't miss on downloading it. So hugely practical. We love to end each episode of the Coaching Cast with our personal song recommendation, giving you energy and motivation as you launch into the next part of your working day. It's my choice this week, and it felt apt as Madge has embarked on her tour, and I'm seeing loads of people going to see Madonna in London at the moment, and it all looks amazing. So I've chosen one of my favourite Madonna songs, which is Frozen.
What a classic. When I saw this, I was like, that is a good choice. I've not heard that song for ages. I'm going to go and put it on now.
It's a banger. I love it. So yes, I hope you go off and enjoy that one. See you next month, CBBs, and remember, you've got this.